Hey everybody, this is Josh here, the Gray Bearded Green Beret. Just want to do a quick preface on this next video because there are some concerns and there's some warnings that I'm going to talk about later on in the video, but I want to kind of bring those to the beginning of the video to make sure that everyone's clear on these. Now, this video is about a concealed wilderness fire and it's mostly going to be used for a bug out type situation. The military uses it a lot when we're evading, when we don't want to be found. Now, there is a such thing as an underground fire, and if you do your research, most of the underground fires that are happening across the world are happening in coal beds. So most of the underground fires are made from coal, not from roots. However, root fires are possible, and root fires are most possible in areas like that are super dry, like the Southwest United States, areas that have a very deep, very heavy peat layer, peat, P-E-A-T layer. Like mostly that's in the northern United States and Canada, and also would be something that I'd be concerned with in an area like Maine, where there's a really extensive root system happening up there. So root fires are possible, they're just not as common as you may think. And truth be told, any campfire can start a root fire if precautions aren't taken, if that campfire is made in those type of areas. It's not limited to this particular technique. So just use precautions whenever you're practicing. Now, the area that I filmed this in is in coastal North Carolina in a pine forest, and that pine forest relies on fire for the health of that forest. And if you look around at the tree trunks during the video, you'll see that they're all black from controlled burns that happen from the managers of that forest. It was an area that's got extremely sandy soil, a really deep sandy soil layer that's got clay underneath that. So it also has a very high water table because I'm near the coast. I took advantage of that opportunity to show you exactly how you would do it in a real situation, right up next to the tree, hidden by other trees. Now, the expectation for that is I'm showing you how to do it if it was real, but when you're just practicing or you're just training, take the precautions. You're responsible for every fire you start. You're responsible for making sure that you put it out. So take the precautions. Don't build it right next to the root system if you don't have to. If you're just practicing or training, don't build it right next to the tree. Don't build these in areas that have heavy peat or extensive root systems or extremely dry areas. There's just no reason to risk the forest. Just so that you can practice something that's not for real yet. You can get that same experience by doing it away from the trees and away from the roots. I have used these pretty extensively in the eastern woodlands, from New York to Ohio to North Carolina to Georgia and everywhere in between without issue. Keep in mind that was for practice for myself, or I was training military, or I was teaching this technique. This is not an everyday fire. In no way, shape, or form am I telling you that every fire you need to build needs to be this technique. I'm just isolating this technique for this particular video. But I don't want to give you the impression that because this is the only fire lay that I'm showing in this particular video that I'm saying this is the only way to do a fire, or that this is some sort of everyday fire, because it's really not. It's kind of a specialty fire. So with that said, let's talk about how to make a concealed wilderness fire. We're in a position, or we're in a situation where we think that we want to be hidden from observation. We want to kind of keep a low signature, keep a low profile. One of the best ways to do that, if you still need to have a fire, is called the Dakota Fire Pit or Dakota Fire Hole. It's the same thing. With that, it has some advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, some advantages is that it's in the ground and it conceals. It's very easy to conceal. The disadvantage is that it creates a lot of ground sign. If you're using a Dakota Fire Pit, it's because you don't want to be seen, and while using a Dakota Fire Pit, hides you from immediate observation. What it does is leave behind a lot of sign if you don't do it right. So if you're being tracked, if you're concerned about being observed, you should be also concerned about being tracked. And if you are concerned about being tracked, there is a way that you need to take this thing, to assemble this thing, to build this thing, so that you can put it back together with as little displacement as possible, and leaving as little a signature as possible for when you pick up and move out of here. I'm not just going to dig it out in the open. What I'm looking for is, anything like big trees that's going to offer me any type of cover and concealment, but I'm also looking for something next to a smaller tree like this little oak, so that when
I have smoke coming out of this. This will help dissipate that smoke, and it'll give me less of a visual signature. You'll still be able to smell it, but you know, you won't be able to see it from as far off because this will dissipate all that smoke. And it offers me some more additional concealment for my area. Now if I just start digging here and throwing this stuff everywhere, then it's going to be hard to put back. So the first thing I need to do is pull out a poncho or a tarp or something and set that up so that as I'm removing material in layers, I can set it aside. That way, if I have to leave really quickly and I want to cover my tracks, or when I'm done with this, I want to cover my tracks and move on, I can try to put everything back to as close to what it looks like now and have less of a chance of a tracker finding me. Now the first thing that I need to do is disturbing as little that's still living as possible. I got to get myself an area here that I can dig, and I'm assuming that you have some sort of digging instrument on your go bag. If you don't, you could easily do this with a digging stick, but I'm going to try to keep the green stuff, and I want to pick up this duff layer as best I can so that it can be replaced easily when I leave. And I'll take more than I need here just so I can show you the technique. Put that on the poncho. Cordage right there. Save that for later. Now with my shovel, I'm going to take off this top layer. And what I'm going to do when I dig this is, hopefully this isn't in the way, but I want to preserve that. These are going to have to go. But what I want to do is, I'm going to dig a 6 to 12 inch circle. So, digging a 6 to 12 inch circle where my main pit is going to be. And that's as big as it needs to be. That's about a 10 inch. There we're about, I'll make it bigger. There's about 12 inches. And then on the upwind side, the predominantly upwind side, I'm going to put a ventilation hole. And in this case, the upwind side is kind of coming from that direction. So I'll probably put my main hole right here, and I'd put my vent hole out here. All right, and the vent hole is obviously quite a bit smaller. This is 6 to 12 inches. Your ventilation hole is between 6 to 8 inches, and it actually tunnels down. But I want the main portion of my fire to have the smoke come up through this tree, so this is going to be a good setup. So what I'm going to do is take those top layers, just kind of score around. And if you're doing this in like a sod, then you want to keep that layer intact because that's what's going to go right on top before you cover it with your duff layer. So I've kind of scored around and got my top layer. Now I'm going to start working my way through. This has got a lot of roots keeping it intact. I'm going to want to keep that integrity as best I can, and it'll go back together a lot easier in the end. There you go. I'll get my other hole and kind of the top layer of that. Because I want it to go right back on top there like a plug. Now all I'm going to do is dig this down to a depth of about 12 inches deep, and I have to keep in mind that all of this that I take out has to go back in, so I'm going to pick this up and put it over in the poncho in a separate area. So now that I've got this dug about 12 inches deep, what I want to do is start doing my connecting hole. And the connecting hole is, 6 to 8 inches, so it's not quite as wide in diameter as the main hole, but it is facing predominantly upwind, which in this case is coming in this direction. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of digging away with this stick. And in a permissive environment, I could get a big baton and just beat this through and connect the holes, and it's a lot quicker. But I'm trying not to make noise, I'm trying not to be found, trying not to be seen. So I'm taking the time to dig it out and then just scoop it out with my hands. And once I get down past the roots, I might be able to poke through a lot easier. Now once I know that I'm deep enough, I'm going to start going from going deep to going across to connect these two holes. At this point, you need to be really careful because you don't want to break your bridge, and it's really tricky with this soft sand. It makes it easy to dig, but it makes it hard to maintain the integrity of this bridge. But if it does happen to break, which I don't know if this one will, it looks like it's holding up pretty well. If it does happen to break, you can dig this out, and you can lay sticks across here, and then you can pack dirt back on top of that and achieve the same thing. All right, so another very distinct advantage of this type of system is the fuel that you need can be, a lot smaller. One, that saves you a lot of time and energy processing larger sustaining fuel. But two, it's a lot less of a signature that you're leaving behind. You can just continue to feed little broken sticks that you find all over the place, and not make a lot of noise with the hacking with an axe and the sawing and things like that. So similar to kind of what the Swedish fire log principle or the rocket stove principle, you've got that going on with the Dakota Fire Pit as well. And I took the time and collected some tinder. Anytime you're walking along, you never know where you're going to need to stop and sit down and set up camp. You don't know what's available in that area. So always, possum mentality, fill that possum pouch. As soon as you find something, stow it away. So what I've got here is kind of a collection of some coarse, some medium, and some fine material. And I try to do all my tinder bundles that way because my goal is to save resources. I don't want to use a lot of fuel, and I don't want to use a lot of the ferrocerium rod. So my goal is to be able to get, if I'm using a ferro rod like I'm going to do for today, if I'm using a ferro rod, I'm trying to get that in 3 strikes or less. 1 strike being the goal. So the key thing is, I've got all my fuel on standby, got all my smalls, and I've got some sustaining fuel there. But if my tinder bundle is correct, I should be able to get this within 1 strike. So a couple of things that I will caution you with. If you're in an area that has a lot of resinous conifers like I have here, you really got to be careful that you don't catch the roots on fire. So in my main fire pit, I was really careful to take the roots out and pack those with sand to try to protect them, because they can smolder for a long way and travel that entire route and spring up a fire somewhere else. The same is true if you're building one of these in an area that has a really dense kind of peat flooring. If you have a lot of peat, really anything with a lot of organic matter that can smolder can carry this heat for a long way and spring up fires elsewhere. So the other thing that I'll caution you on is these things are highly efficient. This is extremely hot right here, like a rocket stove, and I've got a great bed of coals. Just to kind of demonstrate a point of how efficient these are as far as what size fuel they're using. you don't want to put too much in there, or else your flames are going to be this high and you're defeating the purpose of putting it in the ground like this. So just to kind of illustrate that point, I'll throw a really small handful of sticks in here just to show you, once this gets going, it's going to smoke for a little bit, but once this gets going, that little dab, that little bit of fuel is really kind of all you need to really get this thing stoked up again. And you'll see how high that goes. And once you build one of these and play with this for a while, you'll see just how little fuel it takes. If you put more than a big handful on, your flames will start climbing and will start getting out of your hole like you don't want. Like right now, it's a few inches above my hole, so I'm kind of defeating the purpose of it altogether. But you can see I only threw in just a small handful of sticks. But that'll give you an idea and give you a gauge of just how efficient these can be. That's the Dakota Fire Pit. If you have any questions, post them in the comments section below. Hit like on this, share it with your friends. If you got anything, throw it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.